Right, welcome back. And now we're in part 3 of mastering in Wavelab. In this third video, we are going to look at multiband compression. We're also going to look at multiband saturation. And we're going to look at additive EQ and deresonance and a whole lot of other processes that will take our tracks and get them to the final stage. So let's get into it. Okay, so in Wavelab, if you remember, we were doing this song, The Days of Ending. And in the song, what we've done so far, we did our corrections, we've done a DC offset removal, we've done all the quality control, and we started with the processing. The first thing we did was remove frequencies using MS processing and stereo processing on an EQ. Then we went into de-essing and we de-essed some of the slightly harsh frequencies, and then we did a slight 2 dBs of reduction on a bus compressor, and then we did MS processing using the shadow hills. And that's got us to a good starting point to do the more fancy and more challenging things. And if you're wondering whether or not you should purchase Wavelab, just as a thought, Wavelab is quite an expensive piece of software. If I remember, it's quite expensive. Wavelab Pro costs $500, €500, which is quite expensive. But once you have it, you can also upgrade it to something else. If you're upgrading from 10 to 11, it's cheaper. If you have a software such as Reaper, a commercial license, which is, I think, $60, I think. And if you have, if you have any of these type of softwares, it's €100 cheaper. And if you are a student, which I recommend for a lot of students to get Wavelab if you're getting into the mastering, it's significantly cheaper. However, what is the difference between Wavelab and Wavelab Elements is, if you go to, there's a lovely comparison thing over here. Elements can work in high definition. It's very rare, if ever, you'll go up to 384 kilohertz of high definition audio. It just seems a bit over the top. 5 tracks, opposed to above roughly 1,000 or more. Most albums don't really go above, I think the biggest album I know is 24 tracks. It might be 24 tracks. Stadium Arcadium from Red Hot Chili Peppers is a double album that is like 24 tracks or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's not very likely you got to go that far. But 5 tracks is absolutely fine if you're starting out and doing a single. Absolutely fine. You can work in all 32. But if you are using more than 35 real-time plugins, you're going a bit over the top here. Obviously, you get offline processes, but the main difference for me is the number of clips effects you can have is only 2. And the other thing that's a bit sad that you don't have it is the metadata support. You do get metadata support in Wavelab, but in Wavelab Elements, but you do have to add it in manually, and it's a bit of a mission to do it properly in both the audio montage and the audio file environment or audio editor environment. Is that the global analysis doesn't measure in LUFS. It only measures in LU, loudness units, which is fine. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You could always use a third-party analysis software, so it's not too bad. But the one thing that's not in here is DDP support. You can't write a DDP file for printing CDs. Not that that's too much of a problem for most people. And you can see there's quite a lot of other things that are excluded from the Wavelab Elements version. But I think overall, if you want to start your journey in Wavelab, Elements is absolutely fine. It's really great. If you look at, and it is significantly cheaper. It is so much cheaper. And if you get into this, you can upgrade to the Pro version. And the other thing that is, if you're a student, I mean, 66, 67 euros is really cheap. So it's not and it's a really great place to start if you're getting into mastering. that aside, we were busy with this, and the reason I showed you that is because of what is included in both Elements and in the Pro version is what we call the MasterRig. Now, do I use the MasterRig often? Yes, I do, actually. I actually use it on almost every single track because it's just such a versatile thing to have. Now, remember, in Elements, you can only use 2 clip effect plugins. So this will most certainly be one of them. Under your plugins, you would go into Steinberg and go into mastering and get the MasterRig. And if you look at the MasterRig, what's in it? You have a limiter, you have a compressor, you have an EQ, you have a dynamic EQ, a saturator, an imager, and duplicates of all of them. And if you look at what's going on over here, you have frequency, which is an equalizer, de-essing. What you can do with de-essing if you don't have a de-esser, there is one built into Steinberg as well. Steinberg has a de-esser, which is somewhere here. There it is. It's a very good de-esser. I like this de-esser. It's a really nice one. I don't use it all the time because I have other ones, but this one is a fantastic one. You can monitor your essing. You can sidechain. It's got a lot of features. You know, it's there's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm just not using it at this point in my life. So, but the one thing in the Elements version is that if you use something like I think the EQ only has 4 bands and the compressor only has 2, which is absolutely fine. Not all masters require a multiband compressor. I mean, it is the main tool of a mastering engineer, but quite honestly, the multiband compressor can really ruin a mix. Like, it really, really can ruin your music if you don't know how to use it properly. So that's that. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to grab all the things I'm most likely going to use and take it from there. So what am I going to do here? This is now where, if you remember my reference track, I will now start to match it up using the MasterRig. And then again, this is going to be mainly a correction thing, and then after I use the MasterRig, I'll then go into my Additive EQ where I will start to match things. Now, just keep in mind that this track is different in terms of its style. It is the same genre, absolutely, but the style of the mixing engineer who put this song together and the style of the mastering is probably very different from what I do. So, and again, if you remember the last video, I used this to find the bands that I think are very similar, that are very useful for me, and how the reference is different from my master. 7.5, 8K is the first band. That is the most affected. 1K to about 8K is the second band, and 100 hertz to 1K third, and then it's the fourth band from 100 down. So it's a nice way to see where I need to start doing some work, and let's get into that. So the first thing I do, strangely enough, is not going to be new EQ, it's not going to be compressor. The first thing I do is use the imager. This imager is a multi-band imager. Now, there are other ones that you can get as well. A lot of guys are used to widening. For example, from Waves. With Waves, a lot of guys have seen this one. I think it's this one. Yeah, this one where you can widen an image, doing that. Or if you are into free plugins, a really nice one for widening some parts in a mix, like a vocal or something like that, is the one from, I think it's Polyverse. Yes, Polyverse, the spatial wider. This is a fantastic widening. It's also got a low band filter, which is quite useful because of what are we going to do in that imager. So if you're interested in using a widening software, that's a good one to use as well. But what's the difference between the wider or the S1 versus this one? Is that this is multiband. You can adjust every single band how to a certain width. I think FabFilter's Saturn 2 also has multiband functions. Again, very expensive stuff, but you know, this does the job is what we want to do. So let's get those bands that we're talking about. So it was the 100 crossover, and let's get the 1K crossover. And why am I copying it? It's because these are actually good places to start. 8K upwards is your vocal brightness or vocal air, and upwards, and a lot of brightness from cymbals and things like that. And then we get the vocal, the attacking vocal of the range and the body. These two I will independently look at. And then the lows are obviously sub-frequencies, kick drums and things like that. So the easiest place to start is with the low end, and I'll show you why. If I bring on my phase scope and we solo the low area and we look at our phase scope, see what happens with the low area. You can see that it is all over the place, and that is going to cause problems. You can see that it's jumping. Okay, so if you don't know how a phase scope works, essentially a phase scope is our center, our left, our right, and this is what we call antiphase, and this is behind. This is just the inverse of this, the waveform. So if everything's going up, it's also going down on the opposite side, something like that. And at the bottom, we have the phase correlation. 0 means it is like 0 is an okay point, but essentially what you want to do is you want to have your sound between 0 and 1. It's a good place to start. And if it goes below 0, it seems it's a bit of a problem because it means you're out of phase. And I can show you what this means if I go close this for now. Okay, so if I now go into, let's just go get a flipping phase thing. I have a nice one called Stereo Tool. In fact, Green, what's nice about Stereo Tool, it's also made by Flux Audio, the Stereo Tool Analyzer. It's a nice free analyzing tool. What's really cool about this is that you can flip the left and the right independently. You can change the gain of the left and right independently, and the width. You can bring the right in, bring the left in. You can change the width. It's a wonderful free plugin, this, and I would suggest to most people to get it. It's a great play. It's a great analytical tool. So if we look at this, but everything you've done is life from jealousy. You see that most of our phase is in the middle, right? If you flip the phase on the one side, you'll see that this thing will flip and it will start to sound very strange. You can see the correlation down here as well. There's 0. And you see it's not really super in phase like at 1, but it's not likely going to be because there's a lot going on in this mix. There's a whole orchestra in the background, and there's vocals back and forth and left and right and all those good things. But check what happens when I flip the phase. I'm you, show your face and claim yourself in me. A breaker of life, this is my life. And you can hear it sounds incredibly unnatural if you do that. So your main job here is to make sure that it's not your phase is as close to this as possible. But essentially, if you get this far, it means you're monoing the signal. Well, close to monoing the signal. If I show you, if I bring the left all the way into center, and then this one to center, now they're both in center, this should probably be straight in the middle. No, I've had enough. This is the last time you'll show your face and claim yourself in me. And that's not good. So getting it there is mono. I've had enough. This is the last time you'll show your face and claim yourself in me. You don't realize what pleasure we will bring. You're not the host, you're not the master. And when something is super mono, as you know, it will work on every device, absolutely mono compatibility aside, it will make it sound a bit strange. Now, what a wider does, if we have this now on 100% width, I don't condemn nor align myself nor choose the simple fact remains. This line essentially gets thicker, and causes a few more phase problems, right? And it's using phase to move things to the super left and right antiphase areas between the left and antiphase. If we overdo it, it's going to sound too wide, which is fine. But when that happens, it means your stuff won't play on every device very nicely. Like on a phone, if you play something through a phone, it will become not mono compatible. And so this is why we look at a phase scope, to make sure everything is in relative phase being between 1 and 0, and also to make sure that we trying to get it into a big space within the left and right, and not try and avoid the antiphase as much as you can, but to make it be as mono-compatible as possible. So that is now where we're going to start with the MasterRig. Now, if you remember, looking at the low end of here, and bringing our phase scope on again. All right, now, if we look at our phase scope and we look at the low end and press play, you can see that this is jumping all over the place. And these are the super low frequencies. And if you think about any genre of music, almost pretty much, I would say every genre of music, this is one of those cases, I think, where all genres, where it's classical music, hip hop, rock, it doesn't matter. This is not something you want. You want to have the low frequencies as tight as you can. So now if I bring this down and you have a listen, you'll see what it does. All it does is it makes it super tight. I like to keep my bass as consistent as possible, bass frequencies more accurately, and this will affect the kick drum, the bass, pretty much anything that has anything below 100 hertz, and it's just making our bass sound a lot more solid. Once we have that sorted, we can now work on the other frequencies, and just doing that, let's have a listen to what having the bass in the middle does. It just brings it all inwards and again starts cleaning up a whole lot of other things and things like that. Now, this is another thing that's going to be a bit of a problem for me to show and listen, is that what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my reference track and the imager to match the relative width that I can hear. It shows the width over there of what's happening in there versus what's happening in there. I'm not going to use the visual cue, because using the visual cue is just going to lie to me. As much as the computer might think, or the program might think it is that, I'm going to actually listen to it by changing it from original, which is the song I'm mastering, to the reference, and match it by ear, because it's going to be it's going to be a much easier way to do that, and it's going to sound more accurate. But if you don't have this piece of software, what this can do as well is that, because we know that between 0 and 100 is my first band, I can highlight the area and solo it, and then if I play, it will solo that area. Now, that is a very similar function to something like this, but the problem is, that's crazy. You can see that I've just soloed up to 100 hertz, but it's not showing me the width up to from essentially 1K upwards, which is kind of crazy. If you don't have this software, a good way to go about doing this is using your reference track. If you have your reference track, and then on your reference track, you can use an EQ, just any type of EQ, it doesn't really matter. And then use your filters to get around that area. So for example, we're doing 100 hertz, so get this to 100 hertz. And then that's fine. And then once you're doing 1K, 2K, set your next band. So this will be 1K, so 1000. And this one will be, that's one band, and this will be 100. Where is it? same thing, 100, and then just move it along as you go along. And what I'm going to do is that in my MasterRig, under the imager, we've already done the center, so I'm not really worried about that. But I am going to now A/B between the references on the different areas of my mix, and I'm going to adjust the width of these parameters according to the reference. Cool. Cool, so I've now matched what I think is the approximate width of each one. After doing so, I will then go look at what this has done in terms of the ins and outs, because doing this, because we put this in the middle, the left and right are not taking. There's a pan rule called the 3-pan rule, 3 dBs on the left, 3 dBs on the right, and if you put them together, it's 6. Long story, but essentially if you have done that, it's going to change the level of what's going on here. So if I bypass this, for example, you'll see they're very close. The out is, this is doing something, I don't know what, but it's doing something to create 2 dBs, 0.2 dBs more. So if I put the imager on and we have a listen to and have a look at what's going on up here, the in dBs and the out dBs. Okay, you can see that we are almost an entire dB louder. So what we want to do, at the bottom here, it says module output. This is not the whole plugin, it's just the module that we're using. Remember, add module. So we want to bring it down back to where it was originally, which is about a dB. So I'm going to bring this down by about 0.6 of a dB, and now we should be somewhere in the same ballpark of where we started. Okay, let's go back to the image and put it on number 3. There we go. So once we have that, it's now not changing the level, it's just changing the space that's happening on this multiband. So that is a nice thing to start with. And now what I'm going to do is, this is going to be a bit repetitive, but I'm going to now highlight this chorus area. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to use my first stage of compression. And weirdly enough, what I'm going to do is put my compressor on the same frequencies, 100 Hertz, 1K, and 8K. All right. And I usually, when you turn this on for the first time, it brings it down slightly, and I don't know why. I don't know why the presets, not presets, but the stock default settings of the compressors in Steinberg are on. It's not really that a problem. Like, even just if I open the standard Steinberg compressor, it's on and it's got its own settings. It's fine. It's just I don't like doing that. I prefer to have them completely off and then start from there. Okay, so I want to point out that the multiband compressor is a very dangerous tool. You can seriously ruin something with a multiband compressor, so be very careful using this thing. You don't want to do too much. If you do, because remember, you've already got your mixing engineers added compression on every instrument most likely, and on your bus compressor, and we've added a bus compressor, and we've added an MS compressor, and now if we add more compression, it's probably going to start being quite ugly. We're going to make it something sound worse, so we want to avoid that. But in this case, we are going to use the multiband to bring out some of the frequencies. Well, we've got to fix some of the frequencies that are missing. So when we play it, we can actually do a comparison and then start fixing things. Let's try put the loop on. That would be quite useful. Yours is not the power here. I'm taking control once again. So starting with the low end, which is over here. Again, this is in stereo. We don't want to affect the low ends on the side. So let's bring it to MS, turn this guy off. We don't need it. And keep it on M. And I personally think the low end could use a bit more thump. You could use the standard compressor, but in Wavelab, there's four different types of compressors you can use. Well, 3 types of compressors and the maximizer. I wouldn't use that in a multiband. That is seriously how to bugger up something. I'm going to use the vintage compressor. The vintage compressor, if there's 3 compressors, you saw the standard compressor earlier. You get 2 others. You get the vintage compressor. And you also, which is this one, I'll just show you how this one works. It's essentially a Neve compressor. It looks and kind of functions like a Neve. Oh, what's it called? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll go look at it later. Essentially, it's a 1176 styled compressor built in with a combination of a... If you look at an 1176, it's the same thing, 2, 4, 8, 20, and your input and your attack speed. The only difference is on like an 1170, like if you look at any 1176 styled computer 1176 styled compressor, it's also got 4, 8 to 20. So it's kind of emulating this. The difference is you set your compression from your in and out, and your attack is fast, opposed to this one where your attack is fast in this direction. So it's kind of weird that it's a combination between a Neve compressor and a 1176. So anyway, it doesn't matter. I just want to show you. The other one you get is a tube compressor, and this is very much like a tube compressor or a optical styled compressor. I don't know why that's default to 50%. I find that very strange. But essentially this works the same way. You can have a compressor, like you would have let's get a 2A compressor, for example. It works in the same concept. You get a compressor or a limiter. We have the same thing here. We have a low ratio or a high ratio. The difference is you can sidechain stuff here, which is pretty useful. Release time, attack time. You don't get that on a 2A compressor. This is generally just a tube styled compressor or a leveling amplifier that is used on a lot of things. They're fantastic compressors. But yeah, you get the idea. And this is that tube style. And it's kind of, it reminds me of an Avalon. I think they kind of modeled it off on an Avalon styled something or the other, which is kind of interesting. What we got to do now to start off with, the 76 is a fast compressor. The 1176 is a fast compressor, so I'm going to keep it on that vintage styled compressor, the FET styled compressor. I like this punch button. It doesn't do much in a lot of situations, but for here, I'm going to make it punch. And generally, when you're compressing, you want to compress very subtly on a multiband. Otherwise, you're going to ruin something. But in this case, because if we listen to this low end, and we push it up, you'll see that the reduction happens here. Even on full kick, it's not really doing much. So for me, what I like to do is I put this on a 4-to-1, bring the attack down and the release down, and then push it up. I mean, even though, it says it's not doing anything, I can hear stuff happening at that level. And I'm going to push it until I hear a constant signal, which is about there. Cool. And then what I'm going to do, take this out of solo mode, and then I'm going to compensate it because we've added like 9 decibels of nothing, essentially. I want to bring it down on this side, and we can actually see what happened here. Hey, that's actually pretty flat. I did not expect that to be so flat. But hey, if we think it sounds good, it looks good, but let's see if it sounds good. Let's A/B it and see what happens. I feel like there's a little bit too much, just a tad. So I'm going to bring this down. Too much, too little. So I'm going to bring it up by 0.5 of a dB. See how it disappeared when I bypassed it. Now let's put it back in and see what happens. Yeah, I brought it down by 1 dB. It wasn't going up, it's going down, and that sounds better. So for here, this is just a guide of kind of where things are happening, and I will leave it at that, and I'll keep going. And now I'm going to do the high frequencies. I leave the mid frequencies because this is where most of the sound happens. I'm going to probably leave that alone, but we'll see what happens once we add the high frequencies to it. So I've reduced it by approximately 2 dB and brought it back up again, and for me, that's probably enough. Even though this says that there's a lot more, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I don't want to overcompress this. I'll add high frequencies a bit later using something else. And now let's tackle this mid-range. The mid-range is a bit of a problem, because once you compress it too much, it will ruin your entire mix. So, for example, and you also notice before I got to that, I put this on super fast because I just want to hit all the S's, I want to hit all the cymbals, the sharp bits, and all those good things, and keep this in stereo. I'm not really going to affect the reason I did an MS, if you remember, is because our imager is in the middle, so all the low frequencies in the middle, so it's just affecting the middle really. And now let's deal with the mid-range. Let's have a listen to the mid-range. I'm not going to use the solo because that's a bit of a sharp cut. So I'm going to use it here. And it's 100 Hertz to 1K. And let's set it at 100 Hertz to 1K. And let's have a listen to the mid-range. I don't think it actually needs compression. I think it's fairly consistent already, but I do think it's going to be a bit loud compared to the low end and high end. So I'm going to keep the low end off and just bring this all the way out to the high end. So I'm removing this essentially part and just having a listen to what this sounds like by itself. I'm taking control once again. Let's add some compression, see what it does. Honestly, I think it's just making it sound really thin. If anything, we'll add like 1 dB, maybe half a dB of reduction, and then actually cut it out because it is a little bit loud compared to the rest. Yours is not the power here. Cool. That's fine for me. That's fine for me. So I'm going to now bring this back and close that and have a listen again.
Yours is not the power here. I'm taking control once again.
Alright, so that's alright for now. And then the high mids. High mids are where your vocals are sitting, where your snare is sitting, and you know, all the really bright stuff. So let's have a listen. Now here you can, maybe instead of using a, we can use a MS here as well, bring out the vocal and the snare, and then bring down the electric guitars and things that are happening on the side. But I think what this needs is a little bit of compression. I'm going to keep with the standard compressor. I might change it later and see what happens, but I'm going to have this also fairly fast and very quick compression style. This is a little bit slower. As you'll notice that from the low frequencies we have slower attacks, and the higher we go we have faster attacks and also faster releases. So it's because of how waveforms work. If you remember in the previous video I spoke about waveforms and, you know, the slow oscillations versus fast oscillations, so we want to attack these ones quite quickly. So let's bring this down and see what it does. I mean, it's not bad. It's just, let's hear it in context with the whole mix. I'm taking control once again. Yeah, it's all right. I think we can try. Let's try the other compressor. Let's try the tube compressor. Keep the drive off because we'll do that manually. And we'll do the same thing, fast release, fast attack. I don't want it that fast. Let's do it a little bit slower than that. And let's now, this works again like optical, push the in and bring the out down to get compression. So let's try that. Yours is not the power here. I'm taking control once again. Yeah, okay. That one is a bit smoother. I think that one actually rounds it off a little bit better. Yeah, I think that's a bit smoother. I'm going to keep it on that one. That's not too bad. And I think just a little bit is fine. 1 dB is fine. And then we bring it up by 1 again. So, yeah, there we go. So let's just go have a listen to what it sounded like before and versus after. So let's take the compressor off and let's have a listen and then turn it on, see what happens. This is not the power here. I'm taking control once again. Yeah, it's better, I think. And you can also see that the troughs kind of flatten themselves out on the reference over here as well. Good. So next thing we want to go for is now it has brought out a little bit of waffle sound. I call it waffle sound. I don't know, low end rumble around the 50 to 100 hertz area. So on the first EQ before the compressor, I'm going to now eliminate a little bit of that. I lie, it's at 100 hertz. Let's bring it down very slightly. I think 500 is also peaking a little bit, so I'm going to bring 500 down slightly as well. That frequency.
I'm taking control once again. Like these are the days of ending. Yours is not the power here. I'm taking.
Cool. All right, so that is the first stage of multiband compression, and now what I want to do is, so I can still match this a little bit, is use the multiband saturator. I'm going to add some saturation or distortion, subtle distortion, to the mix, and I'm again going to have it on the same frequency crossover points, and I'm going to go for, and I'm going to now try and match this as much as we can again as well. Cool, so I got that tone, and now I'm going to bring it into the mix and see what it does.
It's not the power here. I'm taking control once
Cool, now I'm going to go for this one. What distortion does, if you are unaware of how distortion works, distortion or saturation, which is essentially the same thing, if you look at just this distortion unit, nothing fancy, it's just the one that comes stock with Cubase. That is a standard waveform. As soon as you start adding distortion, it will cut off the tops and the bottoms of the sine waves. You see that? And what it does, if you want to think about it in a weird, illogical way, it's another version of compressing sound, but instead of compressing the sound, it is cutting it off and creating distortion. If you have too much signal going into your output, you clip, and clipping means it will cut off that signal at a certain threshold. So cool, now that we have some saturation going on, I use the tube saturation. I feel like it just gives it a little bit more body. And tape saturation I'll probably use on the high frequencies, because we can actually hear the difference now if we go to the high frequency solo this, and I'm going to now put on the drive on tape. You see how tape is a little bit sparklier, it's a little bit more brighter. Obviously that is over the top. I'm going to get a tone I like, something that will match the cymbals and match the voice brightness. Cool. Again, I'm happy with that, and I'm going to then blend it into the mix.
These are the days of ending. Yours is not the power here. I'm taking control once again. Like
Nice. Okay. That's cool. I won't put drive on the low end. I mean, you can, but it does weird stuff. That would be fine for something like hip hop or like other rock, but I'm trying to make this is a theatrical piece of music, so I don't want it to be super drivey at the low end, and the mid range is just going to create a lot of mud, so I kind of usually ignore this. These two bands depend on what I'm doing. Sometimes I want some mid range if I'm doing some lo-fi things, but this low mids area I'm going to ignore for now. All right, so there we go. Let's have a listen to what it sounds like before and after. Oopsie.
the days of ending. Yours is not the power here. I'm taking control once again. Like
Awesome. Right, and then the last thing I'm going to do in this stage is put on my equalizer again. Now this equalizer again is a subtractive equalizer. I'm going to correct things. I'm not going to add anything. I will add stuff after this using a more modeled styled compressor. Cool, so I'm happy with that. For now, this is a bit wide. Okay, so there we go. We got rid of some more of that boxy sound. Dipping out the 400 hertz around the vocal can ruin the vocal a little bit more, but in this case, it's just getting rid of some of the resonant sound from the orchestras and stuff like that, and I want to get rid of that. This is, again, more of that waffle sound. Right, cool. So that is my chain for the MasterRig. And now, if we listen to what's going on from here and see what we've changed.
The last time you'll come to me with your reckoning.
And it's starting to get a little bit bigger. And now if we go to a different section and just see if it works in every single section, and we will take it from there.
It's your fault.
I think it's starting to get somewhere. Right, so now we get to the more interesting part, which is adding EQ. I didn't add EQ before here because I feel like I want to get rid of stuff first and make it sound as good as it can by removing stuff rather than adding stuff. So now we're going to use additive EQ or creative EQ, and I usually use a modeled styled EQ here, not a parametric EQ. So, I mean, I'm just going to go for ye old faithful, which is a Waves plugin, and you probably know which one I'm going to go for. If you don't, that's fine. But generally speaking, I like to use an SSL styled EQ or a Neve styled EQ, depending on the song. In this case, a Neve styled actually might be fine, but what I want to do here is I want to find my SSL, and I'm going to go SSL EQ and just get my standard SSL GEQ. So this is again from the G4000 series. As you can see, we're keeping it constant, having the G4000 compressor and then a G4000 EQ. And you could use a Neve. I have the TRS-81 styled Neve compressor. This also has MS function. This could be quite useful. We can add saturation by doing stuff like that. But for now, we might do a comparison and use additive EQ on one or use both. Let's see what happens. So let's start and get our reference track again. And we know that that 1K area is being a problem child.
But everything you've done is life from jealousy.
You call me but from the shadows, I come
Okay, cool. So I think using both is actually going to be a good idea here. So the reason for that is this one's a stereo EQ, and this one is a stereo and MS EQ. So I'm going to use the first one to get my stereo, and you can see that 1K starting to sort itself out. This one, we are going to now do the final bit of EQ. I might take away or add to this one. So let's do that. Cool. So we have now done our EQ, and let's now listen to what it sounded like with EQ and without EQ.
You call me friend, but everything you've done is life from jealousy. You call me thief, but from the shadow.
Awesome. I think that's great. All right, so then my last few processes that I'm going to start off with the first part of the master is I'm going to check firstly on resonances. There's quite a few of them in here, and it's usually around the low mids and the lows, and there are no ways to do this with the stock plugins. I mean, there is a way to do it. It's just a pain to do it this way. You could use frequency to just attach the low end, and using dynamic EQ. Personally, the best way to do this is to use a third-party plugin, and this will be something like you can use Soothe 2, you can use Gullfoss, you can use, there's a lot of them, any de-resonator essentially. My favorite that I have is this one. This one's called Equalizer, and again, this is by Wave Factory, and it's got the most boring name in the world, but it does exactly what it says it does. It equalizes. It makes everything equal. So the way I like to go about doing this in a mastering setting is that I will put this, just remember, most of us signals in the M, not in the S. So this is MS. This is in stereo if you keep it on 50%. But I want to attach mostly on the M. So I'll put it on probably 10%. 10%. I'll put it on a little bit to the side, but mainly want to attach the middle, because that's where the low frequencies are. I don't want to boost anything, so I'm going to get rid of everything. I'm going to make this fast, like a compressor. I'm going to make this quite fast, and I'm going to just leave that there. Mix. I'll blend this in as I go along, but let's start with about a 20% mix. And let's now, I only want to attach up to the low end frequencies. So everything low, I'm going to start using. Everything else can be at the bottom. For now, and I will probably go for the high-end frequencies too. So let's see what this does.
No, I've had enough. This is the last time you'll show your face and claim you're serving me. You don't realize what perjury will bring. You're not the host, you're not the master breaker of life. This is my life, this is my dream. Be gone, foul reaper.
I don't know if you can hear it, but this also makes a huge difference on speakers because of the room I'm in. But on headphones as well, this will just clear up a lot of the resonant frequencies happening in the lows. You could go all the way up to 120 hertz if you feel like it. It's about there. So de-resonating. And then the last thing I like to do, actually before the equalizer, is that I will test to see if there's enough reverb on this song. And for me, if I play the end.
Captive, locked in this void of evanescent light.
It might be a tad dry. So to do that, to fix this problem, you can use Reverb Unit. Yes, a lot of people say in the mixing, you have to use it on an auxiliary. We don't have that option. We do not have that option on Wavelab. So what I like to use the Smart EQ from Sonibble. So if I go Smart EQ and I go Smart Reverb, and the reason for this, it just makes your job a lot easier. These reverbs don't sound the most amazing, but what I'm going to do with it is not use it as a reverb per se. I'm using it as a something to make it denser. So if I go play this instrumental bit in the beginning, and use the Smart function to learn the time of the universal sound. Great, it sounds like it's playing in a it sounds like it's playing in a very strange room. So I wanted a natural sound, a rich sound, an artificial sound, an intimate. In this case, I think having between natural and rich somewhere in that area is probably going to be best. So let's change up the sound and see what happens. That's pretty good. Very wider. Nice. So what I'm going to do now is adjust it. So I'm going to get rid of the wet, bring up 100% of the dry.
No, I've had enough. This is the last time you'll come to me with your reckoning. I am the host, I am the master, keeper and prime. This is my life, this is my dream. Be gone, foul demon.
10%, 15%, maybe even less. In this case, I think 12 is sitting nicely. And then my basic masters practically here. All I want to do at this point now is I want to put on my first stage of limiting. Now, I've been paying attention to that the whole time, and remember we normalized this to -16, and I want to now get this level to approximately -15. And the reason I don't want it at 14 yet is because this is still the first stage. I still want that extra dB of headroom for me to bring out that, to use a global limiter on everything. So I'm bringing this back down by 1 decibel because I forgot to do that. The EQ I brought down already, and this EQ I kind of just adjusted by ear because it doesn't have a meter per se, but that's okay. Smart Reverb is going to add a little bit more extra stuff because it's 100% dry plus the 12% wet, so we might need to bring the output gain down on this equalizer as well, which we'll do, and to get this to -15. So what we're going to do is listen through the whole thing, and while I listen through the whole thing, I'm also going to make adjustments to these little things to make sure I'm happy with it. I'm going to pause it right there because if you remember from before, if you remember these little dots will change the gain of sections, and for me this quiet section after the chorus is not quiet enough, and then it doesn't make a big enough impact when it comes into the big medley part. Medley be metal E. See, not enough impact. So on the all men must die, we must go to the die part. Cool. I'm going to set a gain marker on die, and I'm going to bring this, and I'm going to set another gain marker next to it. Go back to that quiet section where it goes down, and I'm going to set on the me, because it seems like the most logical place to put it. On that die where it hits that crash, and I'm going to bring this down to where the dreams start, which is there, and I'm going to bring it down by 2 dBs. This is going to make it sound like a quieter section. 2 dBs might be too much, but we'll see what happens. We might adjust this later. Cool, and now let's make this a bit more exponential to make it hit harder. Cool, and to make it hit harder, what I'm going to do is, he starts singing there, I'm going to bring this up quite drastically by like a dB or 2. 1.5 dB. So from there to there, it's changing by 3 dBs. Cool, let's see if it sounds good going down. Okay, I do think that there's a little bit too much saturation happening on the voice, so I will go back to my MasterRig and back to my saturator and bring this down. Yet I appear before your very eyes. I don't condemn. Cool. All right, now I'll go back and then play it again and see my metering over here and see what's going on, and I'll make adjustments as we go along. Okay, so I've gone through it, the whole thing, and adjusted a lot of the gain things, and now I'm going to play through it again, and I'm going to put on my limiter, my first limiter, and right at the end of the clip, I am going to use just a waves limiter, nothing fancy here, and it's probably not even going to touch it, because I'm sitting at the moment on minus 1.8 on the peaks. On the left, and so that's because of the end. I played it from the end, so I'm sitting on 1.8. So I'm going to set the limiter to only 0.3 or 0.5, probably 0.3, because it's not going to be its first part of limiting. It's just in case it does spike somewhere, which I don't think it will. And to get the level up to minus 15, so I have 1 dB of headroom when I do the final bit of the master. So the limiter I'm going to use here is going to be a Waves, and I'm just going to use the L3. You could use any of the Ls. I think the L3 in this case is fine. It doesn't really matter which one you use. And I'm going to set this to minus 3. And I'm going to set the threshold once I go through it again, and then I'll see how many dBs I require to get it to minus 15. And if it's going over 15, I'll have to bring down the post gain of the equalizer, which I'll do in a minute. So let's see what happens. By the way, on here, I don't want to dither. So I'm going to turn these dithers off because I don't want to dither at this point. Alright, so we've now gone through the entire thing, and we can see that we are sitting at minus 15.4 LUFS, so we're close, so we're pretty close. So all I'm going to do is bring it up by 0.4. Right, and that will bring us up to minus 15, but just to make sure, I will play through it again, and I will see if it does. And if it doesn't, I'll adjust it as I go along. Wonderful. We have now got to minus 15 LUFS. So we have one headroom, So we have 1 dB of headroom that we can use with our final limiting a bit later, and for the adjustments we go to do in the next video. So there we go. So just so you know, this is what it sounded like before.
That's all that must die. You call me friend, but everything you've done is life from jealousy.
And this is what it sounds like after.
That's all that must die. You call me friend, but everything you've done is life from jealousy.
So it's significantly better, but there are some more adjustments that we do need to make as we go along, and we'll cover that in the next video, which will take a little bit of time because I have to do what we've done here to every single track here, and then we will deal with the final bit, which is getting everything to sound like it comes off the same album, and that's that. So, and then we'll deal with rendering, and also we'll deal with distribution as we go along, and how to distribute a track as well. All right then, cool. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll see you in the next video.